Good afternoon. I'm Mary Ann Sullivan, an energy regulatory lawyer at Hogan Lovells here in Washington, focused on decarbonization, not just of energy companies, but these days of companies across the entire economy. And many thanks to DOE for all their help in creating the opportunities for my clients. I'm very pleased to be here today to introduce the winner of the C3E Law and Finance Award, Rachel Taow. I'm especially pleased because Rachel's accomplishments that won her this award are in the nuclear sphere, which is critical to the success of achieving a clean energy economy. Nuclear energy does not always get the recognition it deserves in that area, although I must admit it got good attention this morning. So thank you to those who focused on the nuclear contribution. Rachel is the modernization lead at Idaho National Laboratory for DOE's GAIN program, the Gateway for Accelerated Innovation in Nuclear. That's one of DOE's signature programs supporting the development of advanced nuclear technologies. I'm not sure I've ever been asked to introduce somebody whose background is as interesting as Rachel's. Let's start with the fact that she taught herself to read at age 2. All of you who think you have brilliant children, and I'm sure you do, are a new standard to consider. Then let's get past high school, where Rachel decided to go straight into the Army, and she took up Farsi. She was assigned to the National Security Agency, was a signal intelligence analyst, and then a senior intelligence officer and supervisor in charge of planning and operations for an elite information operations unit for the Army. I'll bet she has some great stories to tell, but she's not going to tell us about those. But I do want to tell you about one story she told me last night that I think tells us a little bit about who she is. So there's Rachel at the blackjack table in Las Vegas. And she's playing along, and there are two guys across the table speaking very quickly. And then she realizes they're speaking in Farsi. And then she realizes they're talking about her and her appearance. And she didn't much care for that, and she was kind of ready to move on. So she starts to collect herself up to move on, and one of them comes over and says to her, "Is that blonde hair natural?" And she turns to them and says, "No, I'm a redhead," in perfect Farsi. She turned and walked away as they picked their jaws off the floor. After her service in the Army, Rachel was a contract specialist and a research agreement specialist for several different organizations who had the good sense to use her language capabilities and her international experience. And then she moved to the Idaho National Laboratory, where in 2021, she became GAIN's modernization lead. I'm sure, I can speak from experience, that it was years of laboring as a contract specialist and a research agreement specialist that gave her ideas about how to improve the process by which government-funded research can be done in partnership with the private sector. GAIN is doing great things to help the nuclear industry, including a lot of startups, to accelerate nuclear innovation. And using accelerate and nuclear in the same sentence are kind of unusual. Rachel is here to talk to us today about what the future of nuclear energy can be, but also to focus. Remember, this is the Law and Finance Award, and she's going to focus our attention on the vital role government funding plays in financing energy innovation. One last thing, in her spare time, Rachel's going to law school at one of the few law schools that allows you to do some of your work remotely. So she's splitting her time between Idaho National Laboratory and New Hampshire. Rachel, you're an inspiration to me, and I think to all of us, for what service to the country can look like, in service that is both incredibly important and fascinating. So thank you for all you do.
We become real friends. Thank you. You set the world on fire.
My Fitbit just gave me a trophy. Makes two. Thank you, Mary Ann. Mary Ann and I had the opportunity to work with Mary Ann a few years back on one of these GAIN initiatives. And I don't know if I told her this, but it was in part her knowledge and brilliance that inspired me to apply for law school. I am now in my second year. I started at age 46, and it's as Mary Ann said, it's a hybrid online program, so I can work full time and go to law school. It's fantastic. It's challenging and rewarding, and it's all the things. But the best part about it is the cohort. I mean, my cohort are also mid-career professionals who are around, close to my age. And so we're all sort of in the same boat of working and going to law school full time. And the best part is I'm surrounded by the most brilliant people I've ever met. And this leads me to this award, is the opportunity to further expand that circle. I've just been so inspired by all of the speeches, and to meet so many fascinating women, and especially those that we're all, like-minded and have similar goals. It is just, I just can't, I guess I can express, and I think some of you feel the same way. Like, it's been absolutely awe-inspiring. So, I moved to Idaho when I was about 5 years old. My dad was recruited to Idaho National Laboratory, and he was a physicist, and I would call him at work, and I'd say, "Hey, Dad, what are you doing?" And he's not going to explain physics to a 5-year-old. So he would always say, "Oh, making money." So I got it into my head that that's what he did, and that's what happened at Idaho National Lab, is that we physically printed money. And I got this for way too late in my life. I mean, I was 15 years old and went to the Denver Mint as part of a journalism trip. And I was just like, I asked some bizarre question about well, what do we do with the money that's made in Idaho? So, to further expand on how smart I am, I want to add to that story about teaching myself to read when I was 2. Before they had books on tape, they had books on record, and I used to follow along, reading the little book that came along with the little records. And at some point, I broke the code. It was really, I was fascinated with myself. But my point of that story is that it's really difficult to peak at age 2. That is the last impressive thing I ever did. I mean, after that, my parents were so disappointed in me. I want to thank my nominator, Christine King, who was not only my director and manager, but also my mentor. She has not only accepted my non-conforming spirit, but she embraces it and gets me to use it. She channels it for good rather than evil. So that's really, it's amazing. So let me talk a little bit more about GAIN. We're housed at INL, but it's actually, as Mary Ann mentioned, a DOE initiative. And it's a partnering mechanism launched in 2016 by the Office of Nuclear Energy to accelerate the commercialization of advanced nuclear technologies. And through GAIN, DOE continually improves the RD&D infrastructure available to stakeholders to achieve faster and more effective development of innovation nuclear energy technologies geared toward commercial readiness. So where I fit into this piece is with my contracting background. So these partnerships are formed through contracting mechanisms, and forming these both and entering these contracts with both the government and the laboratories is, you know, it's challenging. It's really a challenge. So I evaluate these challenges on both sort of a macro and a micro level. I work with both individual companies who are having a difficult time maybe, or challenging time trying to partner with the lab, but then I also I develop strategies for changing, you know, things such as the law, policies, regulations, processes within the laboratories that surround these contracting mechanisms. And one thing I've learned from Christine is to approach these challenges with both empathy and stubborn optimism. And this goes back to why I'm attending law school, because in order to really understand a challenge, or to really address a challenge, you have to understand it. And so that's really what we do, and something that she's instilled into me is like developing that empathy. With GAIN, we interact with the entities that are nuclear entities, and then communities that are not necessarily nuclear but are looking to they're considering transitioning to a cleaner energy source, or thinking about considering transitioning to a cleaner energy source. And there can be a lot of anxiety associated with that, especially when you bring nuclear. You mentioned the word nuclear. There can be a lot of anxiety that surrounds that. But I can't help feel that optimistic about the innovations and opportunities that are available and that nuclear makes available. And I'm so excited that nuclear is getting recognized and getting invited to the table again, to these conversations, and getting to be a piece. I mean, it's a big piece of this puzzle. So, you know, 20, 15, 10, even 10 years ago, I was not feeling optimistic at all that we were ready to address these global challenges. But it's like, now is the time, and it's exhilarating to be in this, to have these opportunities, and to, you know, to be in this community. I recently read this article about, and it talked about 16th century, the late 16th century, and the anxiety in the late 16th century in London, when the increasing cost of firewood was forcing Londoners to transition to coal. And they were just there were these people that didn't even have chimneys, were switching to coal in their houses that lacked, you know, and that was difficult enough. But then there was also the condemnation from the clergy. And while this was justified environmentally, this further complicated and delayed the timely resolution of an urgent energy problem. So coal was literally referred to as the devil's excrement. And you know, sometimes it's like that's kind of how it feels like when you're, you know, when we're talking about nuclear energy. But the good news is that there's so much good news to bring, you know, and so much, you know, we can address these anxieties head on with the data and the science that's available to address, you know, to really try to get people comfortable with the fact that nuclear energy is clean energy. And with that, I just want to thank C3. I want to thank all of you. I have become so inspired listening to you talk, and I look forward to being done with my speech so I can focus on you guys again. Thank you.